Good evening, I'm Brittany Nielsen. We begin tonight with a special remembrance and commemoration for a group of men and women often taken for granted and who suffered through one of the Central Coast's worst accidents 50 years ago this month.
On the morning of September 17, 1963, a tragic event unfolded near the small town of Chualar, California. This disaster would go down in history as one of the deadliest bus accidents in the United States. It claimed the lives of 32 people, all of whom were migrant farm workers, and left an indelible mark on the community and the broader nation. Today, we will take a closer look at the Chualar bus disaster, the lives lost, and the broader implications this tragedy had on farmer labor conditions in America. The early 1960s were a period of intense agricultural activity in California's Salinas Valley. The region was, and still is, one of the most productive agricultural areas in the world, often referred to as the salad bowl of the world. During this time, large numbers of migrant farm workers, primarily from Mexico, were employed to work in the fields. These workers were crucial to the success of the region's agriculture, yet they were often subjected to poor working conditions, low wages, and inadequate housing. Chualar is a small, unincorporated community located about 10 miles south of Salinas, California. In 1963, the area surrounding Chualar was dominated by vast fields of lettuce, broccoli, and other crops. The workers who harvested these crops were transported to and from the fields in buses that were often old, overcrowded, and poorly maintained. On that fateful day, a converted flatbed truck, functioning as a bus, was carrying 58 migrant workers to the fields. The truck was little more than a wooden crate on wheels, with benches inside for the workers to sit on. It lacked basic safety features like seatbelts or proper exits, which would later exacerbate the tragedy. The bus was traveling westward on Chualar Road when it approached a railroad crossing at approximately 6 a.m. The crossing was at a point where the road met the Southern Pacific Railroad tracks at a shallow angle, creating a long, diagonal crossing that limited visibility for drivers. Additionally, there were no crossing gates, lights, or warning signals at the time, only a small sign indicating the presence of railroad tracks. As the bus began to cross the tracks, the driver did not notice the oncoming train. The Southern Pacific freight train, known as the City of Los Angeles, was traveling southbound at nearly 65 miles per hour. By the time the bus was halfway across the tracks, it was too late to stop. The train slammed into the bus at full speed, tearing it in half. The impact was catastrophic. Workers were thrown from the vehicle, and many were trapped in the wreckage. The force of the collision was so powerful that debris from the bus was scattered over a wide area, and the train itself was damaged, derailing several cars. The scene was one of utter devastation. In the aftermath of the crash, emergency responders from nearby Salinas and other towns rushed to the scene. Firefighters, police officers, and medical personnel worked desperately to free the survivors and recover the bodies of the deceased. It was a horrific and chaotic scene as the community grappled with the scale of the disaster. In total, 32 workers lost their lives in the crash, and 25 others were injured, some critically. The victims were all men, most of them from Mexico, who had come to the United States under the Bracero program. This program allowed Mexican laborers to work temporarily in the US agriculture sector. They were promised fair wages and decent working conditions, but the reality was often far different. The bus they rode that morning was a stark example of the unsafe conditions these workers faced daily. The Chualar bus disaster made national headlines. It sparked outrage and brought attention to the dangerous conditions faced by migrant farm workers in California and across the United States. The disaster prompted calls for better safety regulations, particularly regarding the transportation of farm workers. As a result of relentless positioning, the US courts award $1.5 million to the victims of the tragedy. Today, A modest memorial stands at the site of the disaster, a somber reminder of the lives lost and the price paid by those who came to America seeking a better life.
And this was not the first accident or abuse that the workers suffered through, but it was the biggest, and it kick-started an effort to end the worker program. Just 1 year later, it was over.
The memorial, which was erected in 1997, features a plaque inscribed with the names of the 32 victims. In the years following the disaster, the farm labor movement gained momentum. Figures like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta emerged as key leaders, advocating for better wages, working conditions, and rights for farm workers. The Chualar bus disaster, though tragic, helped to galvanize support for these efforts and brought attention to the urgent need for reform in the agriculture sector. The Chualar bus disaster is a painful chapter in American history. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that migrant workers faced and continue to face in the pursuit of a livelihood.